Alrighty, so this is a video covering my experience thus far of the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard. So the iPad Pro was my first real tablet, and initially I purchased it so that I could have a portable video, photo editing device whilst I traveled. Then Apple released the Magic Keyboard earlier this year, and see, this was the game changer. This was the thing that made me actually think, you know what? Maybe I can use the iPad as my main device. Maybe I can use it to replace my Dell XPS 13. Well, to cut a long story short, it hasn't really replaced my work laptop, but it does retain some really killer features that I'll cover in the video today. Now, for a bit of context, the model I own is the 11-inch Space Gray 2018 release. It has LTE and 512 gigabytes of storage inbuilt. The reason why I purchased this type of model was not only to have adequate amounts of storage for photo and video editing, but also that ability to use that inbuilt LTE. As a side note, I wish all manufacturers would consider having this as a feature on their laptops or their Ultrabooks or their MacBooks, because honestly, having to use Wi-Fi tethering to access internet on something like my Dell, for example, is, well, it's not the most convenient thing ever. But I digress. Let's start off with the portability. So by itself, the iPad is effortlessly light and extremely sleek, weighing in at a mere 517 grams. The Magic Keyboard is actually heavier than the iPad itself at 600 grams. So in combination, as a laptop alternative, the total weight comes to 1.1 kilos approximately. So this puts it lighter than the Dell XPS or the MacBook Air, which both weigh approximately 1.25 kilos, but it has the added benefit of being able to easily detach it from the keyboard and use it as a tablet. Build quality wise, it's also great. It feels like a sleek A4 notebook, and the aluminium unibody design makes it feel as if the iPad belongs with your work belongings. It holds up decently well to the occasional bumps and scratches, but I probably would not recommend trying to bend the device. It wouldn't cope well under that circumstance. In terms of the Magic Keyboard, now it's a solid piece of kit. We are talking limited depth flex, super strong magnets that cling to the iPad like there's no tomorrow. There's a rock solid hinge as well, and it closes with a satisfying oomph. Ergonomically, it's not perfect though. Like the matte texture on the actual keyboard itself, the keyboard covering, it's different to the previous smart keyboard, but it still has that tendency to stain and pick up dirt and rubbish, to a lesser extent though. The hinge design, it's only capable for approximately 40 degrees, I think, of full range of movement. And it requires two hands to open, so that's a little bit of a limitation there. These things make it less flexible than Ultrabooks like the Dell, and is particularly annoying when you're having to use the iPad, for example, on a kitchen bench, and looking down upon it, it doesn't quite tilt far enough back for you to see it comfortably at a standing height. However, in saying that, it's just sufficient enough for desk and lap use. Okay, so the touting feature of the Magic Keyboard is its ability to convert the iPad into a laptop alternative. And I have to say, it's not that bad. The chiclet style keyboard, it's comfortable to type on with decent key travel. It puts it above the old butterfly switches on the old MacBooks, and the keys are decently spaced apart. However, they're not as comfortable as the keys, say, on my Dell XPS 13, but I don't regularly get typos, which is the main kind of thing that you're looking for, really. The only downside, as most reviewers have said I could think of, is the lack of function row keys. For me, I like dedicated switches for turning on and off the keyboard backlight and adjusting the screen brightness. So the fact that they're not there on the Magic Keyboard, well, it's a bit of a bummer. But the trackpad is also pretty decent. It's small in size. It's sufficient enough for me to do some basic navigation through the iPad OS interface. And the dive board mechanism, it works really well. Like I can click anywhere and it feels pretty much just the same. You can tap to click, which is great, and the gesture navigation works fantastically with combination of the iPad OS system. So 3-finger swipes is super convenient to switch between different types of apps. 2-finger scroll is buttery smooth, pinch to zoom, same kind of thing. These all work seamlessly, and it contributes to just why I enjoy my experiences using macOS or iPadOS. It just works. Now, one of the main draw cards that drew me to the iPad Pro is that gorgeous 120Hz screen. The high refresh rate is just something you don't get with your regular Ultrabooks and MacBooks, and it's seriously a game changer. In combination with that A12 processor of the iPad Pro, the screen and the whole iPad OS system just flies beneath your fingers. And not only is it fast, but it supports P3 wide color gamut and it's adequately sharp. I think it has a pixel per inch resolution of 264. Now that's pretty sharp. It's sharp enough for me to enjoy all kinds of content as well as for use for photo and video editing. Once again, it justifies the point that we don't really need 4K on such small displays. It also gets sufficiently bright, with Apple claiming a potential peak brightness of about 600 nits. Next to my Dell XPS, the iPad gets just as bright and looks just as good, all but with the addition of 120Hz refresh rate, and who doesn't want that? When it comes to performance, the iPad Pro, it's no slouch. The main reason why I say this is because of how it manages to keep up with my photo and video editing needs. I'm not by all means a high intensity user, but the fact that I can video edit 4K without lag, it's a huge plus, having come from Windows Ultrabooks that haven't been great at doing that kind of thing. Gaming is also great. Back in the day when I was able to actually play Fortnite on the iPad, I could connect my PS4 controller and set the graphics to high and play in glorious 120 frames per second at full resolution. Like, I couldn't dare to do that with my Dell, even with an eGPU hooked up, and it's once again an example of how great the performance on this small device is. Battery life is also decent with the Magic Keyboard 2. It definitely outpaces my Dell XPS 13. I can usually get around 6 to 8 hours of screen on time depending on my usage as well as how bright I set the screen for the day. Another amazing benefit is that the iPad hardly loses battery life when it's not in use. I can sleep through a whole night with the iPad locked and come back in the morning to find that not even a single battery percentage has dropped. Meanwhile, my Dell loses out at approximately 4% of battery life an hour whilst in sleep mode. So yeah, the iPad definitely has amazing battery preservation when it's not in use. Anyway, what else? So the ports. Port selection is a bit meh. You get a left-sided charging on the USB-C port, which is, I guess, better than nothing, but you are kind of limited to just that inbuilt USB-C port of the iPad Pro on the right-hand side for any data transfer or video output, and that's kind of a bit of a bummer. I would have loved to see at least that left port on the actual Magic Keyboard to have the same capabilities as the inbuilt USB-C port on the iPad Pro, but I guess we have to wait for the second generation of this model to see whether or not Apple can implement that. So basically, we've established that the iPad with the Magic Keyboard has an amazing screen, and it's got really good performance, very decent battery life, and a great feeling keyboard and trackpad. So what's there not to like? Well, despite all these great things, I just think that the app support and software is not quite there yet. For one, I use a lot of Microsoft Office, and they're still teething issues when using it with the iPad. For example, Word often crashes or freezes randomly. I don't have the ability to integrate plugins like EndNote to cite text, and the mouse pointer doesn't transform into that text-friendly cursor you get on other Apple apps. So it makes it impossible to know where you are precisely clicking, and I don't have the ability to drag to highlight text. And this is hugely cumbersome when it comes down to using Microsoft Office apps. Now, the second thing is having a file manager. Don't get me wrong, it's a godsend, but Apple, please, there are some things that you just need to implement that you do on the MacBook. For example, a loading bar indicator so I can know when multiple files have finished transferring. The OneDrive integration, for example, it's still super buggy. So if you're ever using OneDrive on the iPad, don't use it with the inbuilt file manager, use the separate OneDrive app instead. Finally, the last thing I will mention is that the split screen function, it still doesn't work for all apps. For example, I still can't put the WhatsApp chat side by side with a web browser. Now, because of these things, iPad, even with the Magic Keyboard, It just doesn't match up to the likes of macOS and Windows devices for my use case. And it's a real shame because I wanted to be able to use this like I would my own laptop. However, having said that, I think this would be an excellent device for travel, particularly because I would generally be replying to emails, doing some photo video editing. And this combination, just to reiterate, has an amazing screen. It's got amazing battery life. It's super powerful. You get inbuilt LTE, and it's a near perfect hybrid solution. So depending on your usage, this could be it. But suffice to say, for my own work purposes, I'll have to stick to my Dell. Okay, so thanks for watching, guys. What are your opinions of this combination? Do you think that this is the way of the future, or will you be sticking to the traditional clamshell laptops and MacBooks? Let me know your thoughts in the comment sections below. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I'll catch you in the next